Everybody hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Is that about right? By this time today, I've lost my shower voice, which is usually very strong, very boisterous in the mornings, but by now, after I've talked all day, sometimes it does. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I can tell you a little bit about myself. There's some push cards that's got some personal information on it. I'll go through it pretty quick because I really want you guys to be able to ask me some questions. Some of you guys are going to have to sit through this multiple times, and I apologize for that. And if you're in the farm, you might get to hear it 4 times. So you may be able to do this for me by the time Thursday rolls around. You know, I've been married 32 years to the same woman. I'm not sure what that says about her. I've got 2 kids, graduated tech. We're a House of Tech alumni. My wife's a teacher, retired teacher now, 28 years. My son is a master's at Tech in family addiction counseling. And my daughter is an education degree person that is working with troubled kids outside the education system. And I am a CPA by trade. I have a practice in Lubbock, Texas. I've been practicing probably almost 30 years now. I'm very much engaged in the private sector, and I understand what taxes mean. I understand when they're appropriate. I understand the damage they do, and you always got to keep that balance and try to figure out what makes the most sense. But I am a Tech grad. I graduated out of Sweetwater High in '80, went to Tech and stayed there. I grew up in Sweetwater, Texas. I worked in the oil field in the Permian Basin, worked offshore on a seismograph ship to pay for Tech, so I'm not opposed to hard work and actually many days sitting in front of a computer. Dealing with the Internal Revenue Service, there are days when I think it would be more fun to be in the oil patch working manual labor. So Stanford, Texas, rural Texas, those are places I've lived. I grew up in the area. I played football down here in San Angelo against the Lakeview Chiefs in San Angelo Central Bobcats, and it was never a positive experience. So as a Mustang, I don't have fond memories of playing football here, but it is a great place to be. I would not want to be anywhere else than west of I-35. You need to know a little personal philosophy. I don't do anything that's not in concordance with God's precepts. Noah Webster's one of my favorite founding fathers, and reading his writings and paraphrasing, he says, elect men with a healthy fear of God. I start every day with that because I know I'm going to screw up, and at the end of the day I repent for it. But I feel like that public policy has a place, has a role, and demands godly people be engaged in that. And I do believe that without that, we have no hope as a nation, country, or community, or state. And with that, God will reward that. He wants that. So I am very much a faith-based individual. I will very much base those decisions around that. I do believe that everything that we face as a society can be found between Genesis and Revelations. It is an instruction and an application manual. It may not be your religious manual, but it deals with everything we face, and I encourage you to get involved in that. Now, legislative session. I've been in the session 2 House terms. 2010 was my first one. I was fortunate enough to receive good committee assignments, even in the face of having some adversarial opposition with the Speaker. What I have found is, if you have good ideas and come to hard work, and you can get the respect of your fellow members as well as leadership, even though you may have some philosophical differences, that will be rewarded. So I went in with this attitude. I am here to work. I am here to work hard. I am to bring solutions to the table. I am here to make Texas better than I found it. And that, fortunately, still today matters in the Texas House and Senate. I am beholden to nobody. I do believe that I have been given a mind that has certain skill levels, and I use that mind. I am a type A mentality. I have no plan B. I don't want to ever give my option to bailing out on my responsibilities. I do believe that it's important to get engaged and engaged early. I've been successful at that. Appropriations experience is invaluable. If you look at who those people in my race against me, the one thing I will tell you, if you understand state budgets, or any budget for that matter, you're leaps and bounds ahead of the curve. Therefore, it is critical that you have that experience going on. And you have the respect and the credibility that comes along being able to have people come to you and ask for ideas and solutions. So, that said, I think that's my background, that's my legislative experience. It's pretty clear what I stand on and what I stand for. I'm very transparent. You may agree with me, you may not agree. Texas has been blessed with a lot of different things. We have challenges that we can solve with the right leadership in place today, with the right mindset. There's nothing we face in a state we can't deal with, but it does take bold and courageous steps to make decisions today that you know will be better 20 years when people are screaming, let's just do it today. We have unfunded liabilities that need to be dealt with as a state while we have been given the resources to fix them. We have some education issues that we need to deal with. Water, and after that water, and after that a little more water, is the area that belongs west of I-35 to the front and center. I have learned there are 2 majorities and 2 minorities in the Texas House and Senate. 2 majorities, 2 minorities. There is the Democrat and Republican, and there's urban and rural. And I will tell you, the urbanization of Texas, to our benefit, has had good people that believe that it is still a state that should benefit all and should be partly all. But there is a flavor and an attitude of some of the old-timers, as I call them, as they move out. Some people have never graced the presence outside of Houston County or Harris County. So our challenge and my experience has been, I spend more time educating urban why it's important that West Texas and rural cities are considered in our decision process. It's not that they have mean-spirit and ill intent, they just don't know. And we are critically different than what a city of Houston would need. And as public policy is made and developed, it's my role to be engaged and educate why that's important for us to have a state. I get it, I've been there, and I see it. So rural versus urban is really more of the debate of the day on most issues. Pro-life, conception to natural death, non-negotiable. I don't bend on those issues. We will continue to have an ongoing battle in the House on the end-of-life issues. I just recently came from Berlin. I was in Russia for a couple of days. I've been over in the Baltics. We went through a concentration camp. I will tell you, anytime you give the state the right to determine who is going to live and die, it has not worked out historically. There's 11 million graves in that region from Poland's and Jews and Russians that the Germans had decided they were not worthy of living. I am very, very much protective of life. It is the sanctity of life that I think God ordained us with to protect. You will not find a negotiation on that. So that's my philosophical background on that issue. In a nutshell, that's who I am. And I'll be glad to take questions and talk about trip to overseas. I will tell you this interesting point. Going through that Baltic region, what would you think is the #1 issue they were discussing in that region? And you got to know the answer.
Immigration.
Illegal immigration. They are having the same debate and the absolute same discussion that we are having in this country over there. Back in '89 with the fall of the wall and perestroika and all the things that have come about and capitalism taking hold, they have now gotten Turkey and Southern Europe and Poland and some of the more depressed economies are crashing into those capital new republics. And they're having a huge problem on how their economy is trying to deal with that. So we are not unique, and they're having the same discussion, the same debate as we're having over there. One stark difference, they don't allow you to stay if they catch you. So I think we could learn a lot and take a little bit from
No free lunch.
So anyway, in Russia, you're there by citizen, visa, or sponsor. If we were stopped and we were not within earshot of our sponsor, we were taken away and interrogated. So they are serious about curtailing immigration. You can learn a little bit from that process. With that, I'll be glad to take questions. Yes, sir.
Would you contrast yourself again with Jody Arrington for the group, please?
Yes, sir. And I'll say it the way I told you a while ago. My mom said, if you can't say something nice, don't say it at all. Jody's a decent enough guy. I've known him. Greg Wortham actually is the mayor of the city I grew up in and graduated a year behind me. Didn't know him a lot, but still I know of the guys. I'll tell you the differences between me and Jody on my account. There's stark differences in me and my opponents. I'm a private sector CPA, run a business, run multiple businesses, land development, those things. I make a paycheck every 2 weeks. My employees come in and they get a check. So I understand what it takes to run a business. I understand what a nickel a gallon of gas or a 1-cent sales tax does to the guy making $8. I'm very, very much, how does it affect Joe before I look at that public policy moving forward? That's very different than my opponent. My opponent's experience is a Bush tenure. He was under the Bush administration for about 7 years, I believe it is, and then he's worked at Texas Tech University for a very good salary. But the point being, his only interaction with taxpayers has been on the receiving of a paycheck end. I think that my private sector experience, my practice, my CPA, the 2 sessions in the House with appropriations experience sets me leaps and bounds apart from my current opponents. I think that just having that respect, credibility from both sides of the aisle. You've got a lady coming up here in a minute, and I won't be here, so she may say all the opposites to this, but she's a great lady, and she supports a great organization that supports me. But the bottom line on this is I think my experience in the private sector is going to be the decision point. There are some very different issues. I've been married to the same woman for 32 years. I've made that point. You need to ask my opponent that stuff. But at the end of the day, if I had to carve it out, experience in the legislature, experience in private sector, making a paycheck, employees, development, those kind of things outside of government, I get the effect of government on people. So that would be true. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What's your take on the immigration problem Texas is facing?
I'm going to give you a full range here, and I'll tell you how I think we fix this and how I think we're stuck. And again, I feel sorry for the ones who have sat through this. Number one, I supported Rick Perry's initiative to put 1,000 troops down on the border. It should free up. It should free up the opportunity for the Border Patrol to go back that jurisdictionally they should be doing their job rather than babysitting. So that and that alone, it was probably a smart move. It does take boots on the ground to stop it. I've been down that border 3 times. The last time I was down there, we were under a surge. In that week of the surge, there was 12 people dead with a cartel bullet in the head. The night that I did nighttime reconnaissance, there was 3 people dead in the river that night from cartel activity. Now, that is a symptom of a bigger problem. We are a welfare state with open borders. It will not survive. It cannot mutually coexist. Open borders with a work state works. Ask New Zealand. Open borders with a welfare state cannot coexist. So what we are seeing partly is the result of a welfare state. So here's the deal. We can fix this, and we can only fix this when there is an offensive military strategy from the federal government, hopefully, long term, that will push the cartel activity back to the Panama Canal. Because until we get those guys pushed back and give the people that were forced out of their environment, you know, prior to the cartels taking control, there was viable commerce going back and forth the border. They would come over and trade, and they would go back and school. It was a nice time. Most of these people did not ask to be run out of their home. But the cartel activity has done that. We will spend $1 trillion as a federal government in Iraq helping the oppressed. I can promise you there has never been more oppression than just south of our border. So what we have to do long term, I'm going to answer your question, but long term, we have to be able to say our defense of our borders, foreign and domestic entities, is a job of the federal government that they failed woefully, and they will need to send boots on the ground and push the cartel back so that then corporate America can reestablish job opportunities over the border, no different than where we go and rebuild things that, you know, democracy driven, to where these people have opportunity to go back and work and go home. That's the long-term solution. Do I see the federal government making an offensive? No. So in the meantime, Texas is left with a $500 million bill, $12 million a month to support national troops, and $1.3 million a week to support DPS and training. It'll be about $450 to some change to defend something that we've already should have to be defending. And I would be remiss to tell you that the next battle is suing the federal government for that money or keeping payment of that money, which statutorily we cannot do, but I'm ready to draw that line in the sand. Because the state of Texas cannot afford that, and we cannot continue at an accommodation of those people that are coming into this country. The more time that elapses and we begin to accommodate, we will run the risk of citizenship being granted by de facto. And a 50,000 influx into our public school system in the state of Texas is $600 million of taxpayer dollars. It will bankrupt our state, and it will kill our country. And let's just throw out the other principle. It's the law. A society without law is chaos.
Yes.
Our government is civil authority. It's ingrained in Romans, and you have to have civil authority or your society will not survive. So all that to say, I support the governor in his initiative. I think it's a Band-Aid at best. It's not his fault. But somewhere in the near future, the line in the sand is going to have to be drawn. And Texas jurisdictionally is going to have to assume the role of being able to push those folks back. But that's an evolution process, or just continue this process of spending more money to fix a system that we don't have the ability to fix. Yes, sir.
Would you support putting sanctions on Mexico to get Mexico to clean up their side of the border?
I would do anything that will remove the obstacles to let those people go back and get their lives back and have commerce. Here's the unfortunate thing. Most of these people are bypassing the Mexico government because they've said, you're not stopping here. So all their faults, they basically said, you ain't stopping here. So I don't know how effective anything to Mexico would be just because it's corrupt. Their government's ran so corrupt, and I don't know how you put sanctions on a corrupt government, because here's the deal. The cartel's got a double deal. They're actually making money on child labor, sending them up here, and while that distraction's going on, they're moving more drugs than ever before. And you can't deal with people that are non-human. Cartel's non-human. They decapitate people, they hang them from the bridges, they show them off as intimidation. They put guns to the people's heads to get them to mule further drugs to come over. It's a sad plight, but this country has to be able to get real about the reality of what's going on, and it requires federal offensive strategy, in my book, to fix it. Yes, ma'am.
The House in particular, and our representative is pushing an increase in gasoline. And there's also doing away with the diversion of the funds, for the per gallon tax. There's also been talk in the last couple of years about doing mileage tax. And then there's also the constitutional amendment to go ahead and I believe set aside some money for roads and everything else. Now, really don't like the idea of getting hit in my pocketbook twice, for tax. If they're going to raise the gasoline tax, don't do the mileage, in my opinion. Thoughts on what needs to be done with TxDOT, because they've really done some major screw-ups, and we've seen some around here. When they,
Right.
they
I'm going to lay out my transportation plan, and if this has been video, my opponent will now have my transportation plan, which is a huge advantage for him because of his lack of experience in the legislature, he has very little solutions. So this will be something that you can say, I heard it here first. Transportation needs. They are a state priority. I think that's one of the core functions that government should do. Transportation specifically. Currently, we pay for DMV, DPS, and 25% of the gas tax goes to education. That's statutorily / constitutionally set that way back in the 70s. And Representative Darby and I agree on some level, and on some level we disagree. And on the idea that we have to go to raise gas tax first, I'm not in agreement. So here's what I would hope to see in transportation. It's about 4 or 5 things that I take exception with. Number one, I do think that if you ask the common person out there, they would tell you gas tax is going to roads and bridges. Nowhere else. It's not. So I do think that while we're going through the constitutional amendment process, that's going to move $1.4 billion estimated from the severance tax over to Fund 6, go ahead and get the constitutional amendment removed. That will put the burden on the general revenue. The reason I like that as an appropriator, the more stuff you have in the general revenue, the more transparent your budget is. Therefore, you have to be honest in your budgeting, and you can tell taxpayers where the money's going and how it's been coming out and what it's spent. So number one, I think you end that diversion, constitutional diversion on the gas tax of the 25%. Number two, the DMV, we moved a large part of that over to the general revenue. And number three, the DPS. Now DPS is statutorily available under the transportation funding, or it could be GR. I think we need to get everything that was meant for roads and bridges to go to roads and bridges. And once that's done, we take the amount of money that's going to be diverted off the severance tax into it, see where we're at. There's an estimated $5 billion need. That's the diversion, that's the transparency function. Here's some other things that I've not gotten comfortable with on transportation. And I'm currently having some of this data pulled. every contract that's been bid and let, I want to see what it was bid at originally and what the change orders were subsequent to it. Because until I know for a fact that if we're going to contract for $5 billion, that it's not going to end up being $9 billion, I want to know that there's some controls. I do that through government efficiencies and reforms. So I don't have a problem if it's $5 billion. I just want to know if it's $5 billion, it's not $9 billion. And I'm not telling you there's a bunch of crooks, but Texas does have a history of not being very effective or efficient with use of the funds. So I want to make sure that what we do give them, that it does get to the roads and bridges as it was intended to do. Third thing is, I still have not seen a plan, and I have not seen an example. If we give TxDOT the $5 billion that they say they need, how is it going to relieve urban congestion in Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio? If the guy sitting on the 3 o'clock highway on I-35, if we put the $5 billion in there, are we going to create a better lifestyle so that he doesn't sit for 4 hours on I-35? To date, I don't know that discussion and debate's been happening. So I want to know if we're going to go down this road. And I'm not arguing the fact that we're a growing state. Our infrastructure probably hasn't kept pace with the growth. We're 1,000 people a day. You know, cars are more efficient. People are driving less because they're just staying around their home area instead of driving. But at the end of the day, I've got to have transparency in my budget process so that we know that what the real cost is, what the real revenue stream is. I've got to know that if the money's spent, it's going to be spent on what it was intended to do. And I need to see a real plan on how is this going to fix the urban congestion, because that's really what this is being driven by. It's bad. If you go to Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and sit on that I-35 corridor for any amount of time, you're going to be stuck. But I don't know that we've had a plan that says it. And I think fourth thing, and the most important thing to me, what is the equitable distribution of those fundings to West Texas? West of I-35, if we go ahead and do this, we have maintenance issues. We're not building big roads and bridges out here, but we have a huge maintenance issue and lots of lane miles to do. So I want to hear and understand how that's going to help us in that regard before we just arbitrarily say, King's X, you win, here's your money. I've never really seen, we're from the government, give me the money, trust me, it'll work out okay, work out too well. And I'm not anti-government, I'm just saying we have an obligation to hold them responsible for doing what they said and being effective with what they have. Yes, sir.
Ms. Perry, you talk about urbanization, and I understand the statistics are absolutely in support of what you're saying. Well, with urbanization comes education and problems with education. My wife and I had the privilege of living in Beaumont, Texas for 30 years. We raised 3 boys there. I'm very proud to say that not one of them ever went to a public school until one of my boys went to Texas A&M. My kids went to church school because the public schools were a complete and utter disaster. Amen. I think it was child abuse to put your kids in those schools. I talked to school teachers at the high school level who couldn't speak English, and that was their only language. It was horrible. Right now, I believe several of the highest officials in Beaumont are either under indictment or already in prison. It was just outrageous. So I got to pay tuition at, my kids went to a Catholic high school, and we're not even Roman Catholic, but that was the best education available. I got to pay tuition for that, and I got to pay nearly $10,000 a year in property taxes for those horrible schools. And I'm wondering what your position is on funding or alternative solutions to let people have choice as to what school they want to go to in Texas.
And you're going to throw, I'm going to get way over here. Here's the deal, and I'm going to use Lubbock as an example. Okay, I'm going to give you Lubbock. And currently in Lubbock, Texas, we have homeschool, private school, charter school, and public school. I'm a product of public school. My wife taught in public school. There are problems in our public school system. There is undoubtedly problems in our public schools. Some of it is imposed by the state of Texas. Now, I will tell you in Lubbock there is choice. Choice abounds. My private school guys and my homeschool guys, if you really have honest discussion with them, will say, the minute you guys move funding to us, we now are subject to some stuff that we absolutely want to stay with. So there's a balance there. Here's my deal. I'm using Lubbock as a deal. And I did not know this was just unique to my region. There's unlimited transferability amongst every one of those schools in Lubbock, Texas. with the exception of capacity. But I will tell you, a kid in Lubbock, Texas, and my daughter was a prime example. She moved from one district to another, and so did my son. But they have choice in that routine. And what that has done is made schools better and makes better. And competition in public education is huge. I love homeschool, I love private school. All of those options I think fit. There's not a silver bullet. The examples you speak to of the Beaumont people, there are bad apples in every deal. But here's, and I had this discussion a while ago, one thing that frustrates me a little bit, just a little bit, and the state did this at some level, asking teachers to teach things that aren't relevant, giving kids no options. HB 5 broke that out to where the kids are going to have relevant education. But here's what I'm saying. I think HB 5 and 5-year look back is huge. I think the dropout rate's different. I think kids are graduating with relevancy and making income. So I'm excited about that curriculum. But in my district, I have been to poor schools, rich schools, sat in the classrooms, actually sat in classrooms. And with no exception, there's always that 1% that are honoring and mischief and bad kids, probably. I was one of those, I think. But for the most part, I see kids engaged, I see teachers teaching and doing a wonderful job at that level. So my position on education is this. I want all the options on the table. I want competition in the public ed, and I think the other venues produce that. I think we can make public ed competitive. And I'm working with some very good groups that have some very good ideas. I will not deny Houston ISD a voucher system if that's what they need. I will be dang sure opposed to it if they try to impose it on Tahoka, Texas, which is doing well. I don't know. I'm just, one stop should not fit all. So in that hierarchy, all of that stuff's on the table. And Senator Patrick and I have had this discussion that rural is different a little bit, but if it's working, I've got a school, 2 school districts actually, Roscoe ISD and Friendship ISD. Outside the box superintendents that are thinking big, and their kids are graduating with entrepreneur mindsets. They're going to work and making good money. They're in the public school system. So it's not fair to rope them into this equation that everything's bad in public school. So we need to separate the wheat from the chaff. The good teachers need to be rewarded, they need to be respected, and they need to grow in that. The good superintendents and administration that are thinking outside the box, that are growing kids to be, we need to recognize that. And there will always be a private school. Now, speak to one thing you did say that you will find me very supportive of. It's time that we quit being politically correct and start being biblically correct.
Yes, amen.
I think that there is a window and an opportunity, and I will never force, but I'm going to heavily encourage at every opportunity that that's put back in our curriculum.
Good.
And I'm going to work through SBOE to do that. We have an SOBOE to make up that will probably be more open to that than ever before. And you know what? Statistics bear me out on this. I'm a numbers guy. When you took that out of the classroom, we end up with all these social ills. And kids are needing boundaries, and parents aren't there to give them. So you will see a strong emphasis every time in any way I can re-engage that curriculum. You know, it is legal today for the Bible to be taught in high school. It's just not a priority. Now, I don't want to teach Bible just because of its religious attributes, but I think there are some life applications in there that those kids could learn from and use go throughout, whether it be engineers, doctors, or plumbers. So all I have to say is that I'm with you. But to just throw out the public education system in general and say we've got to divert funding and do things to it, I'm not there because I've seen some really good stuff. And I've seen really good teachers doing really good things. There's a balance somewhere in here. But I will exempt out, if given the option, to say 30,000 and under don't have to participate and make it a local option, but to mandatorily insist on a voucher program across the board and just throw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm not there yet. So I know that's probably not the answer you hoped, but I try to be big enough minded to know that not everybody has the right answer, but there's an answer here for someone to get to.
I'm just cynical about government control because
cynicism,
of Common Core and things
Common
like
Core
that.
has no place. Common Core absolutely has no place. Anytime a government, I will go back to my concentration example. Whenever government decides what the next minds will learn, it's not a positive thing. It's not. So we align very, very closely. I'm just saying I'm not willing to throw away a system that's got some warts on it. Some of them are our doing for a system that we can tweak and make better. I'm willing to give it a chance to make better. I'm working with brighter minds than mine on that issue. And here's the deal, I'm bridge building. I'm taking those great superintendents and putting them with some of the education reformers that prior to this discussion, they were like, we don't agree, we're not going to talk. I said, is the end goal better education for our kids? They said, yeah. I said, well, then we have common ground to work from. And they're having those meetings as we speak. I would say that's the best thing I can do is get good people pulling the same cart on opposite ends of the political spectrum sometimes to make education relevant to kids. What else?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Any others? Yes, ma'am.
Where are you on American law or American courts?
Well, absolutely. Our Constitution did not include Sharia, did not
With
include...
the state government,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
will that ever get passed?
I think you're going to see a Senate that can pass it in a heartbeat, which has been the obstacle in the past. And that's one area where I will tell you Duncan did a lot of great things for this region, and probably y'all will never know how much he put into doing great things for this region. That's one area that him and I will philosophically disagree on. Sharia law, whatever. This is state of Texas and federal. We don't have any room for any international law. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to be Article 5 concept.
Yes.
And also the nullification.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any?
Yeah, I'll tell you where I'm going with that, and it's really not real public, but
What was the question?
the question was where I'm at with Constitutional Convention or Article 5, states' rights, those kind of issues. The border security is a good example of states' rights. If the federal government won't do their job, the state has an obligation to protect its citizens. On the Article 5 CONCON, there's bright minds just debating what that really looks like. Here's what I think we're going to have happen, and I'm working with a group out of Utah and a group out of California. We have picked one single issue. I won't go into the detail, but we have found one single issue that unanimously can probably break open state rights. We will take that to the Supreme Court in the next 6 to 12 months, I hope. We've been working on it, but it's an issue that the feds will lose, and if they lose that issue, then it opens up the box to do some other state rights issues. Historically, when the feds see a group of legislatures and bodies coming together, then they kind of get their attention. What we've had so far is citizens, and their voice should count just as much, but unfortunately they kind of discount because there's not a unanimous issue. This one issue is something that I think we win. It's based on private property rights, and I think if we win that going forward with the groups that we're building together, and it's a coalition of several states with legislators, senators in those houses, coming together and start building a coalition of states at that level. If we win that, then we set the pace to get some of our state rights back. So we are working on it. A little different avenue, but working on it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, would you be comfortable with people with concealed carry permits open carry?
I'm comfortable with concealed carry all day. I'm comfortable with
Okay.
campus carry all day.
Would you be comfortable with those?
I am comfortable with Second Amendment rights being able to open carry. I would vote for it if that's what my constituents say, but let me give you a different perspective, just a little different perspective. We have made great strides in Second Amendment rights in so many levels. I personally believe that if we go to an open carry in the state of Texas, that you will have more gun-free zones and more 30-06 signs show up the next day. I believe that there is a backlash that is pent up that would come out of the woodwork. And I'm talking about, I'll use the example, soccer moms in Baskin-Robbins do not want to see that. So, I'm just saying, public policy being what it is, be careful what you ask for. You may end up losing traction, and even more so, and here's what I can't do. Let's say we go to the open carry. Let's say that we have the backlash that I predict, and there's 30-06 signs going up every day the next day, and everybody's prohibited from carrying. I go anywhere I want to now, and it's a defense mechanism. When I put it out here, I'm drawing attention, and it possibly becomes an offensive issue on somebody's mind. But here's my deal. If you ask for that today, and you come back to me next session and say, we want the right to carry this regardless of who owns that property, I will side with property rights every day. So I'm just saying, if we get it, and that's what you want, we go down that road, and you come back to me next session and say, hey, we lost all our freedoms, we can't carry these anywhere, because all these private property owners said no, I'm not going to support telling private property rights what they can do. So I'm just trying to give you public policy. Campus carry, I'm good with all day long. My son goes to Texas Tech University, raised around guns, and I want to know that he can take out the guy with the AK before the cops get there. I have no problem. On a concealed basis, I think you lose some of your defense, because it's defense now, it's offense when you put it out there. But be aware, if you create these gun-free zones and you want me to reduce property rights, I will stand with property rights all day. So just different debate. I try to give you your options. But if everybody in the world tells me open carry, I will go. Is that other? You can tell I'm transparent. You can tell I'm an independent thinker. I think that works good. So.
And to not have our gun rights infringed, I mean, we interpret it as written, but I don't know that we're back when that was written, what that, I mean, something's got to transition toward, I believe. It can't just, for people to have their minds renewed
Yeah.
and accept, and that can be a step-by-step type of thing.
Right.
Just a
Last
comment.
question.
One comment. I do have a concealed handgun license and I do carry, but I would be most uncomfortable if there were visible guns walking around everywhere. Just my comment.
I'm just telling you, right there you go. And there's not a right or wrong. I'm just telling you what I see is happening is you're going to ask me to take private property rights away, and I'm not going to do it. So, you know, I kind of think we have the best of both worlds. I will support my constituents. I can tell you I don't know what that holds. I really don't know where my constituents are at on that. I personally will not sacrifice private property because I know it's predictable that you will have 30-06 guns go up everywhere in the community the day we go open carry.
Yeah.